The day Kemi told her husband she was carrying his child was the same day he decided to abandon them both for a dream that would drown him in regret. After 6 years chasing riches at sea, he knocked on his own door like a beggar and watched his child run to another man's arms for protection. In the coastal village of Badagry, where the Atlantic Ocean kissed the shores of Nigeria like a lover's whisper, Emeka Nosu cast his fishing net into waters that had fed his family for 3 generations. The morning sun painted the waves gold, and the salt breeze carried promises that tasted like hope and smelt like possibility. But hope can be dangerous when it grows too big for the soil that nurtured it. Emeka Nami, his wife Kemi, called from the shore, her voice carried by the wind like a song. At 22, she was beautiful in the way that made the ocean jealous. Her skin smooth like polished ebony, her eyes bright like stars reflected in water, and her smile warm enough to melt the coldest harmattan morning. She waded into the shallow water, her wrapper lifted above her knees and her feet dancing on the wet sand like she was performing some ancient ritual of love. In her hands, she carried news that would change their world forever. "My husband," she whispered, placing his weathered hand on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." Emeka's net slipped from his fingers and disappeared beneath the waves like his old life sinking into memory. He should have been overjoyed. He should have lifted Kemi in his arms and spun her around until they were both dizzy with happiness. He should have run to tell his mother, should have celebrated with palm wine and prayers of thanksgiving. Instead, his mind filled with the stories the deep-sea fishermen told when they returned from months at sea. Stories of water so rich with fish that one trip could make a man wealthy enough to build concrete houses with zinc roofs, to buy land, to send children to university, to escape the cycle of casting nets in shallow waters for small fish and smaller dreams. "A baby," he repeated, but his voice sounded hollow, like an empty calabash. Kemi's smile faltered. She had expected joy, had dreamed of this moment for months. Instead, she saw something in her husband's eyes that made her blood run cold, the look of a man already planning his escape. That evening, as they sat in their small mud house eating rice and stew by the light of kerosene lamp, Emeka's mind was already sailing toward distant waters. Through their single window, he could see the house that Olu Martins had built after 3 years fishing the deep Atlantic, 2 stories high, with electric generators and a television that the whole village gathered to watch. "Olu Martins came back from the sea today," Emeka said, his voice tight with something that tasted like envy. Kemi looked up from her food, her heart beginning to understand what her mind refused to accept. "Our baby will need things, Emeka. Clothes, food, medicine when he is sick. But most of all, he will need his father." Emeka pushed his plate away, the taste of contentment suddenly bitter in his mouth. And what can a father give who has nothing? What kind of man watches his child grow up poor when opportunity is waiting in deep waters? The kerosene lamp flickered between them like a heartbeat about to stop. In its dancing light, Kemi saw her husband transforming into a stranger, saw love being poisoned by the whispers of ambition. The decision that breaks hearts. "The deep-sea fishing boats leave next week," Emeka said, his words falling between them like stones thrown into still water. "Captain Adebayo said he needs experienced fishermen for a 2-year contract. The money, Kemi, the money could change our lives." 2 years? The words escaped her lips like a prayer to a God who had stopped listening. "Emeka, I will give birth alone. Our child would take his first steps without his father. He will say Papa to empty air." But ambition is deaf to the cries of love. It hears only the sound of opportunity knocking, and it opens every door except the ones that lead back home. That night, as Kemi slept with one hand protectively over their unborn child, Emeka made a decision that would haunt him for years to come, a decision that would teach him the difference between providing for your family and abandoning them in the name of provision. The morning Emeka left was the kind of morning that breaks hearts and changes destinies forever. The sky was grey like old tears, and the ocean was restless, its waves reaching toward shore like fingers trying to hold on to something precious before it slipped away. Captain Adebayo's deep-sea fishing vessel, Ocean's Promise, sat in the harbour like a metal beast waiting to devour dreams. Its rust-stained hull has seen more storms than most men see heartaches, and its diesel engines coughed black smoke into the dawn air like an old man clearing his throat before delivering bad news. Kemi stood on the dock, her wrapper whipping around her legs in the salt wind, her hand pressed against the small swell of her belly that held their future. At 4 months pregnant, she glowed with the kind of beauty that comes from creating life, but her eyes were dim with the pain of watching life walk away. 2 years, Emeka said, his voice trying to sound strong but cracking like dry wood. 2 years and I'll come back with enough money to build you a house like Olumartin's. Our son will never lack for anything. He will lack his father, Kemi said quietly. But her words were swallowed by the sound of waves against the dock. Emeka pressed the small bundle of naira notes into her hands. His savings from 3 months of local fishing. For the baby, for medicine, for whatever you need. The money felt heavy in her palm, but not as heavy as the weight settling in her heart. She watched him hug his mother, watched him shake hands with friends who would forget his face before his ship disappeared over the horizon. As Emeka climbed aboard the vessel, his heart fought a war with his mind. Part of him wanted to turn back, to run to Kemi, to choose love over opportunity. But the other part, the part that had been poisoned by stories of men who returned from the sea rich enough to buy respect, pushed him forward. "You are making the right choice, brother," said Chike, another fisherman leaving his family behind. "These women, they don't understand. Sometimes a man must go away to become the man his family needs." But as the engines roared to life and the boat pulled away from shore, Emeka's last sight of land was Kemi, standing alone on the dock, growing smaller and smaller until she was just a dot of pain on the horizon of his ambition. The deep Atlantic was everything the stories had promised and more. Fish so abundant that they seemed like silver rain falling from Neptune's throne. Water so rich that each net brought up enough to feed villages, enough to make dreams taste like reality. For the first 6 months, Emeka sent money home every time a supply boat made contact with shore. Letters from Kemi came back with the supply runs, her handwriting growing rounder as the belly grew bigger. "My husband, the baby kicks strongly now. I think he's impatient to meet his father. The doctor says I'm healthy, but I miss you like the earth misses rain. Your mother helps me, but at night, when I feel the baby moving, I wish your hand was here to feel him through." But the deeper they sailed, the more distant shore became. Not just in miles, but in memory. Life on the fishing vessel had its own rhythm. Wake before dawn, cast nets, haul in fortune, sleep exhausted, repeat. Days became weeks, weeks became months, and slowly, gradually, the ache for home began to feel less sharp. The money was intoxicating. More cash than Emeka had ever seen. More wealth than 3 generations of his family had accumulated. When he looked at his growing savings, he could almost taste the respect it would buy, could almost see the house he would build, the life he would create. "You know what, Emeka?" Captain Adebayo said one evening as they counted their latest catch. "Men like us, we are not meant for village life. The ocean calls to us. This is where we belong." Around them, other fishermen nodded in agreement. Men who had been at sea so long they'd forgotten what their wives' laughter sounded like. Men who measured love in the money they sent home rather than the presents they withheld. "My contract ends in 18 months, Emeka said. But even as he spoke, he felt the pull of deeper waters, richer fishing grounds, bigger opportunities. "Contracts can be extended, brother. The ocean has more wealth than any man can gather in 2 years. Think about it." That night, as Emeka lay in his narrow bunk listening to the waves sing lullabies to the moon, he had no idea that hundreds of miles away, his wife was in labor calling his name through pain that would bring his son into a world where fathers were just photographs on the walls and promises carried by the wind. The pain started at sunset on a Tuesday. Waves of agony that crashed through Kemi's body like the very ocean that had stolen her husband. She gripped the wooden frame of their bed. The bed where her child had been conceived in love and would now be born in loneliness, and called out to a man who was too far away to hear. "Mama! Mama, the baby is coming!" Emeka's mother, Mama Nkechi, had been preparing for this day for months, but nothing could prepare a woman's heart for watching her daughter-in-law give birth while her son chased fish in distant waters. The small mud house filled with the sounds of new life fighting to enter the world. Kemi's cries mixing with the prayers of village women, the hiss of water boiling on the kerosene stove, and the whispered encouragements that tried to replace a missing husband's voice. Push, Noamon, the midwife urged, her experienced hands steady even as her heart broke for this young woman laboring without her husband. Your baby wants to meet his mama. Through waves of pain that felt like the ocean itself was crashing through her body, Kemi held on to one thought. When Emeka returns, he will hold his son. He will see what his absence has cost him and choose never to live again. At 11:47 p.m., under a sky full of stars that looked like scattered diamonds on black velvet, Chidi Nosu entered the world with a cry that seemed to question why his father wasn't there to welcome him. He was perfect, 10 fingers, 10 toes, his father's strong chin and his mother's bright eyes that seemed to hold questions too big for such a small face. He looks like Emeka, Mama Nkechi whispered, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. Exactly like his papa when he was born. But looking like his father would be the closest Chidi would come to knowing him for years to come. Kemi wrote the letter with shaking hands the day after Chidi was born. My beloved husband, God has blessed us with a son. Chidi arrived last night, healthy and strong. He has your eyes, your stubborn chin, and he cries with the same determination you had as a baby. Mama Nkechi says he is perfect, and he is. But Emeka, my heart is not complete without you here to hold him. He needs his father's arms, his father's voice singing lullabies. But the letter sat in the village post office for 2 weeks before the next supply boat was scheduled to make contact with the deep-sea fishing fleet. By then, other events would make the letter seem like a message from another life. Meanwhile, 200 nautical miles from shore, Emeka was experiencing the intoxication of unprecedented success. Their latest fishing run had brought in a catch so large that each fisherman's share was more money than most people in their village saw in 5 years. Emeka, my friend, Captain Adebayo said, clapping him on the shoulder as they counted mountains of cash. You have a gift for reading the waters. Stay with us for another year and you will return home rich enough to buy half your village. The offer was tempting. More tempting than returning to casting nets in shallow waters for fish barely large enough to feed a family. The money felt real in his hands. The wife and child he had left behind were beginning to feel like characters in a story he had once heard. That night, Emeka dreamt of home. In the dream, he was walking through his village, but everything was different. The houses were bigger, the roads were paved, and people looked at him with the kind of respect that money commands. But in the dream, he was walking alone. No wife ran to greet him, no child called him Papa, no family gathered to celebrate his return. He woke up with salt water on his face, but whether it was sea spray or tears, he couldn't tell. 2 months later, when Kemi's letter finally reached him, Emeka held the photograph of his son and felt nothing. Not joy, not love, not even curiosity. Just the distant recognition that this baby belonged to someone he used to be. Chidi's eyes stared up at him from the photograph like accusations he wasn't ready to face. This child was a stranger, born into a life Emeka had already sailed away from. Captain, he said that evening, his voice steady as the ocean horizon, I want to extend my contract another 2 years. What Emeka didn't know was that his decision to stay at sea would cost him more than just time. It would cost him the chance to be called Papa, the opportunity to be needed, and the love of a woman who was about to discover that some doors once closed by abandonment can never be opened again. If this story is gripping your heart, hit that subscribe button right now and tell me in the comments, have you ever chosen opportunity over family? What happened? Your support means everything, and trust me, what happens next will shock you.
4 years passed like seasons of rain and drought, and Chidi Nwosu grew up thinking Papa was just a word other children used for the man in the photographs his mother kept on the wooden shelf beside their bed. At 4 years old, he was everything a father dreams of in a son: intelligent eyes that missed nothing, a laugh that could chase away any sadness, and hands that were already skilled at helping his mother with daily tasks that should have been shared with a husband. "Mama, why doesn't my papa live with us like Emeka's papa lives with him?" Chidi asked one morning, his small fingers tracing the face in the photograph of a man who looked like an older version of himself. Kemi knelt down to her son's level, her heart breaking as she searched for words that could explain abandonment to a child who still believed the world was fundamentally fair. "Papa is working very far away in Wami," she said, the lie tasting bitter like medicine in her mouth. He's trying to make money for us." "But Uncle Tunde works in Lagos and he comes home every Christmas. Why doesn't Papa come home?" The question hung in the air like smoke from their cooking fire. How do you tell a 4-year-old that his father chose money over watching him learn to walk? How do you explain that some men love the idea of family more than the reality of it? Provision came in the form of Okechukwu Okafo, a young teacher who had recently returned to the village after completing his education in Abuja. At 28, he was everything Emeka had not chosen to be: present, reliable, and more interested in building relationships than chasing wealth. Okechi, as everyone called him, first noticed Kemi when she brought Chidi to enroll in the village primary school. The boy clung to his mother's wrapper with the desperate grip of a child who had learned that people can disappear without warning. "Mrs. Nwosu, would you like to see where you'll be learning to read and write?" Okechi said gently, kneeling to Chidi's level. Something in the teacher's voice made Chidi look up. Here was a man who spoke to him directly, who didn't look through him or around him like he was invisible. What started as educational support slowly became something deeper. Okechi began visiting their home to help Chidi with his letters, staying to share dinner, lingering to help with household repairs that Kemi could not manage alone. He never tried to replace Emeka. That would have been impossible. Instead, he simply filled the spaces that abandonment had carved out of their daily life. He taught Chidi to throw stones into the ocean, to identify different types of fish, to fix a broken fishing net. He became the man who answered when Chidi called out in the night, who bandaged scraped knees, who attended school programs when other fathers sat with their children. Meanwhile, Emeka's letters home had become as rare as rain in the Harmattan season. The money still came, more than ever before actually, but the words had dried up like a river in drought. His latest letter was 3 months old and barely half a page. "Kemi, business is very good. I am sending more money. Take care of yourself and the boy. I will come home when I can." The boy, not our son, not Chidi, just the boy, like he was some stranger's child that Emeka felt obligated to support financially. Kemi folded the letter and placed it with the others in an old biscuit tin that was becoming a museum of their dying marriage. She no longer waited for letters with the desperation of earlier years. She had learned to live in the present tense, and the present tense included a man who came home every evening, who remembered to ask about Chidi's day, who never made promises he could not keep. One evening, as Ukeki helped Chidi with his homework while Kemi prepared dinner, the little boy looked up from his exercise book with the kind of innocent directness that cuts through all pretense. "Uncle Okechi, why don't you live with us like other papas live with their families?" The question froze the 3 adults in a moment of truth that had been building for months. Kemi's hands stopped stirring the soup. Okechi's pen stopped moving across Chidi's homework. The evening birds seemed to pause their singing to listen for an answer. "Chidi," Kemi said carefully, "Okechi is not your papa." "But he acts like my papa," he replied, with the logic of childhood. "He helps me with my schoolwork, he fixes things when they break, he makes you smile. The other children say their papas do those things too." That night, after Chidi had fallen asleep, Kemi and Okechi sat outside their small house, under stars that looked like scattered promises in the darkness. "Kemi," Okechi said quietly, "that child needs a father who will be here, not just money sent from the sea, but presence, love, guidance." "His father will come back," Kemi said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Will he? And if he does, will he know how to be the father Chidi needs? Or will he be a stranger trying to buy love with the money he chose over family? The question settled between them like seeds waiting for the right season to grow. What neither of them knew was that far out at sea, Emeka was finally preparing to return home, carrying wealth beyond his wildest dreams and expectations that had grown too big for reality. The collision between the father who had left and the family that had learned to live without him was about to create the most painful lesson of his life.
6 years after sailing away to seek his fortune, Emeka also returned to Badagry like a conquering hero in his own mind and like an unwelcome ghost in reality. His success was undeniable. The money he carried could have bought up the village. His clothes were fine, his jewelry was real gold, and his confidence was the kind that comes from years of commanding respect through wealth. But success had changed him in ways that went deeper than expensive fabric and golden chains. He was no longer the young fisherman who had cast nets in shallow waters. He was a man who had learned to take what he wanted from the ocean, who had forgotten that some things, love, family, belonging, cannot be harvested like fish or accumulated like coins. The village had changed too. New houses had been built, including a beautiful 2-bedroom home with zinc roof and solar panels, where his mud house used to stand. His heart swelled with pride as he approached. Surely Kemi had used his money wisely, had built them the life he had promised. But as he drew closer, the sounds coming from the house made him freeze like a man who had seen his own ghost. Children's laughter, a woman's voice singing, and underneath it all, the deep rumble of a man's voice, not his voice, telling stories that made his family laugh with joy he had never been able to create. Through the window, Emeka saw a scene that shattered his expectations like waves against rocks. Kemi sat on a wooden bench more beautiful than he remembered, her face glowing with contentment. Beside her sat a man he didn't recognize, tall, gentle-looking, wearing the simple clothes of someone who had never left home to chase dreams in distant waters. And between them sat a boy, his son, Chidi. The child was 6 years old now, no longer the baby Emeka had left behind, but a real person with his own personality, his own voice, his own life. He was reading aloud from a book, his small finger following the words, his face bright with the kind of intelligence that comes from being nurtured, encouraged, loved every single day. But the child was reading to the stranger, leaning against the stranger's man's shoulder with the casual intimacy of a son who had never known absence, never felt the ache of abandonment. Emeka knocked on the door of his own house like a beggar asking for entrance. When Kemi opened it, the joy that should have filled her eyes was replaced by something else. Shock, confusion, and underneath it all, the kind of sadness that comes from having already grieved a loss. Emeka, she whispered, her voice carrying no warmth, no welcome. You came back. Behind her, the stranger stood up, his hand instinctively moving to Chidi's shoulder in a gesture of protection that cut Emeka deeper than any blade. Papa, Chidi said, but the word sounded like a question, like he was testing a foreign language on his tongue. Are you my papa? The innocence in the question was devastating. This child, his child, was looking at him like a character from a story, someone who might be real or might be make-believe. Yes, Mwami, Emeka said, kneeling down to Chidi's level, his hands trembling as he reached toward the son he had traded for treasure. I am your father. I have come home. But Chidi stepped back, moving closer to Okechi, his small hand finding the teacher's larger one with the instinctive trust of a child who knew which adult would actually stay. Who is this man? Emeka asked as he stood up, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had learned to command respect through wealth and intimidation. This is Uncle Okechi. Chidi answered before his mother could speak. He teaches me to read. He fixes our roof when it leaks. He tells me stories about brave fishermen who always come home to their families. Each word was a nail in the coffin of Emeka's expectations. He had returned expecting gratitude, expecting his family to be waiting like a pause in a song, ready to resume the melody when he was ready to sing again. Instead, he found a complete song that had learned to play without him. Kemi, Emeka said, pulling out a thick bundle of money that represented years of sacrifice and ambition. Look what I brought home. Look what I earned for our family. We can buy land now, build a bigger house, send Chidi to the best schools. He is already in a good school, Kemi interrupted, her voice steady but cold. Okechi teaches him and he learns well. We don't need your money to take care of what you left behind. The words hit Emeka like physical blows. What I left behind? This is my family. This is my son. Your son, Okechi said quietly, speaking for the first time, doesn't know you. You are a stranger to him. A name his mother mentions sometimes, a face in a photograph. You cannot expect to return after 6 years to find everything waiting for you like an old shirt in a wardrobe. That night, as Emeka sat alone in the village guest house, counting money that suddenly felt worthless, he realized that the ocean had given him everything except the one thing that mattered most. But was it too late to earn back what he had traded away? And would his son ever call him Papa with the love that word deserved?
For 3 weeks, Emeka tried to buy back his son's love with the same determination he had once used to harvest the ocean. He brought gifts that made other children in the village jealous. Expensive toys, fine clothes, a bicycle that gleamed like captured sunlight. But Chidi accepted them with the polite confusion of a child receiving presents from a well-meaning stranger. Thank you, sir, Chidi would say, the formal distance in his voice more painful than any rejection. Not sir, Noami, Emeka would plead. Call me Papa, I am your father. But Papa is not a title that can be claimed with biology alone. It must be earned with presence, with sacrifice, with the daily choice to show up when showing up is hard. One evening, Emeka watched through the window as Okechi helped Chidi with homework, their heads bent together over a mathematics book, the teacher's patient voice guiding the child through problems with the kind of gentle persistence that builds confidence rather than fear. You see how he looks at that man, Mama Okechi said, sitting beside her son on the wooden bench where she had watched him grow from boy to man to stranger. That is how you used to look at your father when he taught you to mend nets. But I am his father, Emeka said, his voice cracking like dry wood. Are you? His mother asked gently. Or are you the man who provided seed for his creation? There is a difference, Nami. A big difference. The next morning, Emeka rose before dawn and walked to the beach where he had once cast nets with dreams of bigger catches. The ocean stretched before him like a mirror reflecting 6 years of choices, and for the first time since returning, he truly understood what he had lost. He had chased wealth in waters so deep he had forgotten which direction led home. He had gathered treasure while his son took his first steps, spoke his first words, learned to read, learned to trust someone else's voice when nightmares came in the dark. Kemi found him there as the sun painted the waves gold. I thought I was providing for my family, Emeka said without turning around. I thought money was love made practical. Money is important, Kemi replied, sitting beside him on the sand where they had once planned their future together. But money cannot teach a child to be brave when he is afraid. Money cannot kiss scraped knees or attend school programs or answer midnight questions about why the world sometimes seems unfair. I want to be his father, Emeka whispered, his voice carrying the weight of 6 years of regret. Not the man who sends money from far away, but the man who is here when he needs me. But I don't know how. He already has a father, a better father than I ever was. Kemi looked at this man she had once loved completely, this man who had chosen opportunity over family and learned too late the difference between providing for loved ones and loving them.
Okechi is not trying to replace you, she said quietly. He is trying to fill the spaces that absence carved out of our lives. But Chidi has room in his heart for both men if you are willing to earn your place instead of demanding it. What followed were the hardest and most important months of Emeka's life. Instead of trying to impress his son with gifts, he began showing up. He learned Chidi's schedule and appeared at school programs, sitting quietly in the back, applauding his son's achievements without demanding credit or recognition. He began visiting daily, not as the returning hero claiming his throne, but as a man asking for the chance to serve. He repaired things around the house without being asked, learned to cook the foods Chidi loved, memorized his son's favorite stories so he could tell them properly. Most importantly, he learned to listen, to hear about Chidi's friends, his fears, his dreams, to discover that his son wanted to be a teacher like Uncle Okechi, not a fisherman like the father he barely knew. The breakthrough came 4 months after his return. Chidi fell from his bicycle and scraped his knee badly enough to bring tears. Emeka was closer than Okechi, and without thinking, he scooped his son into his arms, cleaned the wound gently, and held the boy while he cried. "It hurts, Papa." Chidi sobbed against his father's shoulder, and in that moment of pain and comfort, the word Papa finally carried the weight of real relationship. Slowly, carefully, like fishermen mending nets torn by storms, they rebuilt their family. Not the same shape it would have been if Emeka had never left, but something new and perhaps stronger. A family that included Okechi as the man who had been present when presence mattered most, and Emeka as the father learning to earn his title through daily choices instead of biological claims. Kemi and Emeka didn't resume their marriage. That trust would take longer to rebuild, if it could ever be rebuilt at all. But they learned to co-parent their son with the help of the man who had kept their family whole when it should have fallen apart. "Papa," Chidi said one evening, as Emeka tucked him into bed. "Okechi says you caught many fish in the deep ocean." "Yes, Noami, many fish. But you came back home. That means home is better than fish, right?" Emeka smiled, his heart full of the kind of wealth that cannot be counted or deposited in banks. "Yes, my son, home is much better than fish, and I will never forget that again." 3 years later, Emeka still lived in the village, working as a local fishing guide and using his deep-sea knowledge to help other fishermen improve their catches without leaving their families for years at a time. He had invested his savings in community projects, a school, a clinic, boats for local fishermen who wanted to fish deeper waters but return home each evening. His relationship with Chidi grew stronger each day, built on presence rather than promises, on shared experiences rather than shared DNA. And while he and Kemi never remarried, they learned to be partners in raising their son, supported by Okechi, who became not a replacement father, but an additional blessing in a family that had learned to define itself by love rather than traditional structures. The ocean still called to Emeka sometimes, whispering of deeper waters and bigger catches, but now he understood that the richest treasures cannot be caught in nets. They must be cultivated with patience, nurtured with presence, and protected with the daily choice to value people over profit, relationships over riches, love over the illusion of success. Some lessons cost everything to learn, but once learned, they transform not just the student, but everyone their life touches.
I hope you enjoyed this story. Kindly share your thoughts about this story with me in the comment section below. Give this story a thumbs up and share this video with your loved ones. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so by now. Thanks for watching.